Welcome everyone. My name's John Salmon and I'm here with Mark Brandenburg, who is the real technical wizard behind our project Reflections, a Cuong Nhu History. And we're here tonight with Terri Giamartino and Allyson Appen from California. And let's get started. I'm going to do this alphabetically so I don't get in trouble.
Right.
All right.
There you go, AA. Yeah.
Allyson has been involved in Cuong Nhu for 34 years. She has a dojo in Berkeley, California. She graduated from the University of Florida, a Gator in graphic design. There
Isn't
they
that
are.
what we do?
And works in online marketing. She began in Cuong Nhu after finishing the Gainesville Marathon in 1980. I don't know any details of that. We will get that story momentarily. Married with 2 children. She is a self-proclaimed dojo rat. Whether she still is, I don't know, but at a younger age was. Several different martial arts, which we'll go through. She's been on the board of Sonoma and on Palma, which you're going to hear very much more about tonight. The name of her dojo is unpronounceable, so we will ask her that as well. And as far as I have heard, when we asked her about her black belt test, she was the first official black belt at Sungming Chu.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Terri is also from California. She began her training in 1978, but not necessarily with Cuong Nhu.
Correct.
We'll get that story. In Shotokan. She was Palma's first president and one of its founders. She does community work in the Berkeley school system with bully prevention. We'll hear a little more about that. She opened her first school in the mid-1990s. She is in the Alma Hall of Fame, 2013, and was the Palma Martial Artist of the Year in 1999. Also the proud parent of 2 boys with her partner of 34 plus years. Allyson, tell us about running the marathon in Gainesville.
Well, it was the Florida Relays Marathon, and it was flat, which was great.
Because Gainesville
has
flat.
No hills. Yes, so it was a lot of fun. And right after the marathon, I was like, okay, the marathon's done. And I had planned to move to New York City upon graduation. I was in my senior year in college, and in thinking about moving to New York, I knew I had to learn some self-defense before I went. So I was in the art department graphics lab and turned to the guy behind me and said, "Hey, Ernie, I need to learn some self-defense. What do you know of any group on campus?" And he said, "Yeah, there's this Cuong Nhu Club and it's free." And I was like, "That's it."
That is one of the bigger selling points. So you went to the Cuong Nhu Club. Gym, Florida Gym,
Florida Gym.
Field. Where was it
Florida
in
Field.
relation?
It was on the Florida Field, but we also used the basement of the gym for, if the field was restricted, then we were in this awful tiled floor basement.
And as a lead-in question, there had to have been a gentleman there with a whistle.
No.
No whistle
Mary
at
Davis.
that? It was Mary Davis.
Yes, Mary Davis was the head instructor and my instructor, and I met her that first day. So.
Terri, how did you get started in this? Because you had martial arts experience before
Well,
this.
yes, I had about 5 years of martial arts training before I ever found Cuong Nhu or even had heard of Cuong Nhu. I, like Allyson, had moved from Arizona to San Francisco, and I was an artist and I had a studio in an industrial area in the city. And I felt like I also needed, like most women, some self-defense training, because while I was very good with my mouth, I didn't necessarily have the hands and the feet to go with it. So I found a self-defense group that was run by this one woman, Marty Messerly at the time.
Right.
And I started taking self-defense classes, which I really enjoyed because it was, you know, very physical and practical, and it was social because I was meeting new people. And it gradually turned into a love of martial arts.
Okay.
So long story short, that teacher left to go to Johns Hopkins to study medicine, and her school was taken over by two different instructors. One taught jiu-jitsu, a Wally J. person, and another was Valeria Ramirez, who became my Shotokan instructor. And I studied with both of them in both arts and trained in both arts with ranking until my jiu-jitsu teacher eventually stopped teaching. And then I focused on Shotokan until my Shotokan teacher left.
Apparently, you have this thing about your martial
Teachers
arts
leaving
instructor
me.
keep leaving. Okay, we got the program.
Yes. So I looked around for another school. I found a gentleman in the East Bay who was ex-military named Thomas White. I started training with him in a school of all men. At the time, I was the only woman, and I dressed in the bathroom while they had the dressing room. And lo and behold, you know, he lost the space.
And he left.
And I started looking around in Berkeley, where I was living at the time, and I came across the triumvirate of Miguel Estrada and John Burns and Donald Grassmuck. And so I really liked the fact that it had a Shotokan base, which I was very
And
familiar
that was
with.
John's school?
Yes. Well, it was the three of them at that point. John hadn't gone off on his own.
And John hasn't left.
No, John still has a school. He just doesn't have those two partners.
Right.
And so I liked that it had mat arts. I liked that it had weapons. So it sort of brought together all the things I had been doing into one system. And it was close to my home. And so I started training, and here I've been ever since.
This was not on your list of questions because I didn't expect that answer. First impression of John Burns.
Oh, this could get me in trouble. Well, let's see. John Burns. I walked into his dojo, and first I was with a friend of mine from France. She's sitting there, and we're checking out the school. And John's watching us. I come back to try the class, and we're sparring. And the first thing John does is sweep me on a hardwood floor.
Okay.
Which didn't make me happy. I came from a style where you weren't allowed to sweep, number one. You know, so I wasn't really prepared for what was happening. But nonetheless, I got back up and I kept going, and it just got better from there forward.
Allyson, what was you've
He
told?
swept me off my feet, so to speak.
Okay. You talked about your first sensei was
Master Mary Davis.
Master Mary Davis.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Mary.
Mary was an amazing person. She was intense, right? She was very, very passionate about Cuong Nhu. O-sensei was her mentor, and she was in his first class. And she was very devoted, and she had beautiful technique, beautiful focus, lovely form. She was a spitfire in sparring, and she was as inspiring as, you know, anyone could be. So.
As teachers, which is what senseis are, you are now teachers. You've had many teachers. Which, it doesn't have to be one, which had the most influence on you, either as a teacher or as an individual?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard to say because I would say O-sensei first, who was also incredibly inspiring.
And you two came in not in the first group before he went back to Vietnam.
Right.
You were in the second group after he returned.
Correct.
Did you have contact with O-sensei in Gainesville?
Yes, yes. And I started at the Cypress, which was the on-campus
Right.
club, and I changed my plans to move to New York after graduation so that I could stay and train, because I just
And that's
fell
where-
in love with Cuong Nhu.
And that's where Master Mary was at Cyprus.
That's where Mr. Mary was in Cyprus. And so I would see O-sensei at all of the quarterly testing and picnics, and hear him speak and everything. And I met him, and when I was a green belt, he invited me to come train at the center with him in the soft style curriculum, which at that time was separated.
Yes.
And so I was training 6 days a week,
Dojo rat. Okay.
at both Cypress and the center.
How did you mix and match the hard and the soft? And was there any soft style component of the regular Cuong Nhu curriculum at that time?
Well, I think the Wing Chun and the Vo Vietnam blocking systems can be, especially the Vo Vietnam, very soft and just deflective. So, but in terms of, and we had to roll and fall. We had to be able to take falls. But at that time, the Aikido types of techniques and a lot of the throwing techniques, that was all separate.
And that was all in the...
Yes.
And if I recall, the rankings were a rainbow.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
You started out with a white belt, and you got a red stripe, etc. Actually, you started out as a white belt, and then the next rank you got a red belt, and then rainbow stripes going up the red belt.
And how long was the soft style curriculum in place? if
How
you
long
recall?
had it been in place?
No, was it? I know it was discontinued at some
Right.
point and everything was merged.
Correct. Yeah.
About how long, do you remember?
I don't remember, but it was a new program when I joined it. And so I think New 1 had been designed, but New 2 and New 3 had not. So I learned those as they were designed by O-sensei. But to your point, to your question about
most
integrating,
influential instructor who helped you,
it would
whose
be
teaching
split.
style you feel you emulate? Or
Yeah, so I mean, Master Mary, for sure, because she was my main instructor. And so I got a lot of teaching influence from her. And O-sensei more as a person, you know, as an inspirational leader.
Terry, who would be yours?
Well, similarly to Allyson, I'd say back when I was studying Shotokan, Valeria Ramirez represented similarly to me, like Mary Davis perhaps to Allyson. She was someone that was very committed, disciplined, hardworking, had very good technique, and I appreciated the physical beauty of form. And I mean, to this day, kata is probably my favorite aspect of martial arts, for all that it encompasses. And you know, I always aspired to look like she did doing forms. Like I remember her gankaku to this day, you know, how inspired I was by it. When I came to Cuong Nhu, I really was attracted to the way John Burns could move. I really appreciated the artistic nature of his physicality. And so that kind of spoke to me for the things that I'm interested in. O-sensei, similarly to Allyson, I think while I never really saw him move that much, I never really saw him do katas or forms, but he was just so impassioned, and it was such a way of life for him that I found that also inspirational, and it was just, you know, true to his being. You know, I appreciated that about him.
You were in Gainesville with O-sensei. You were not in
No,
Gainesville.
I was in Berkeley, California.
So this question is to you. Any memories of the little nose back from that? And it sounds like you might have some too. So you get to go
Not
first.
like Allyson.
They were teenagers when I joined Cuong Nhu, and They were very brash, and the boys especially kind of full of themselves. Not, you know.
And they will eventually be on the couch,
Right,
so they'll get their turn.
Understandably, they were, you know, top-level competitors. They were junior national champions. They were
Quinn
really,
and Val.
really excellent, yes.
Not on? Yes? No?
You know, I don't remember On's record, but you know, their house was just full of tournament trophies, and we're, you know, these big trophies.
Did little sister make them do push-ups? Because she makes us do push-ups.
I think push-ups were just part of life. One of the things that O-sensei, or maybe it was one of the boys shared, was that they weren't allowed to watch TV unless they did push-ups and sit-ups during the commercials.
I heard they couldn't eat if they didn't train.
That's true. They couldn't eat
Yeah.
if they didn't train.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but they were, you know, they were teenagers. They were full of life, and well, they are now still, you know, and but they were they were funny.
Many of our current students want to know what the master's black belt tests were like. You were the first Sung-Ming Chu.
I was.
We've heard stories they went on for days, they went on for weeks.
At that time, so that would have been 1984.
Okay.
There was a panel at my test. I actually don't remember who gave the test because there was this large number. It was a large test. There were, I don't know, 20 people, maybe.
Remember
more.
any of the people in your class? In your testing class?
In my testing, I think that from the Cypress Club, there.
Or anybody who...
Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay, that's okay.
But my memory of the test was I got probation on my boards because I didn't break my boards in the required number of attempts. And at that time, we had learned to do katas in ebb and reverse. And I had to do every single kata in reverse, in mirror image. And so I had practiced them in mirror image doing one per count, but not one count all the way through. So that was a
no mirror
bit of a
image
challenge.
ebb? No mirror image ebb?
Well, we had to do a few of those, but not all of them. So there wasn't one kata done in the normal way. So that
Terri?
made an impression.
Luckily,
I would imagine
luckily
so.
I missed that test.
Your black belt test.
My black belt test was in Berkeley, California.
Okay.
O-sensei came to the Finnish Brotherhood Hall, which was where we had our classes. And I remember there was, I think, 3 of us going for black belt, somebody going for Nidan. And so it was a small group of us. And I remember spending an entire day doing fighting form.
Okay.
Because we would do it again and again, and then O-sensei would break into a teaching moment, and we would go off on some tangent for about an hour or so, and then we would come back to fighting form. And I remember specifically Annie Johnston, who still trains with me at my school. She and I were like, we weren't even sure we remembered fighting form, especially by the end. We were still sort of like, which kick comes next? Because there were just
they fly,
so many combinations
Yes.
that were sort of out of sync with the normal katas that you did, you know, unusual combinations.
Do you each teach fighting form in your dojos?
I do, and I have taught it recently at training camp. So yeah, we keep it alive. I know it a lot better now.
Training camp you just mentioned. How many training camps have each of you been to?
The first one, at the time that I was training, you had to be a brown belt before you could attend.
Right.
So my first camp was 1983 in Charleston, South Carolina. At the
Terri, do
beach.
you-
My first training.
At the beach?
It was near the beach, yes.
I don't remember the year. I think it was like 1985 maybe, and it was in Atlanta. I
That
believe
was
was
a
the
good
first
one.
one. Oglethorpe, that's what it was, yes. That was my first training camp, and It was different. It was different for me.
How
It's
were
the
the,
first time we had a schedule of teachers.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
how are those training camps different? We happen to be at a training camp right now. There's 438 people here.
Yeah. There were probably
remember how many
150
people.
maybe.
Less, for
Yeah, it
sure,
was
less.
much less.
Did they do the black belt tests at training camp like we do now?
I think so. I think so. The main difference was prior to that camp in Atlanta, there was no assigned teaching of the classes,
Okay.
and so and you know, we had to be on time, or he did push-ups and no skipping warm-up and all of that.
And it started early in
And
the
it
morning,
started
like
early in the
7
morning.
a.m. with running,
Yeah,
or 6
right.
a.m. with a run.
Well, that was.
But that was optional.
That was
optional.
But you would come out there and
Really optional or optional?
I never ran, I'll
Okay.
tell you that.
Yeah.
Not at 6 a.m.
But you would come out there and a sensei would say, okay, Sensei Mary, you go teach Bo. You know, Sensei John, you go teach Akata. And suddenly you would be teaching a class. And so in the Atlanta camp, which Master Mary and I coordinated, we actually made assignment, or we had Sensei tell us what he wanted, and we set up a schedule and assigned teachers so that they could actually prepare for their classes. So
Any particular training camp memories? Good, bad? Well, obviously there are a couple.
there are a few.
There's
It's sort
a
of
few.
where do you start?
Yeah.
You know, I think that there's amazing testing, the social gatherings in the dorms,
The skit
the
nights.
skit nights.
Yeah, do you remember when it started?
I remember one skit night, I think it was in Florida, it was in Gainesville, where the guys decided to do a jockstrap fashion show. And they all came out with fig leaves and you name it. Burns and Mike Ponzio in women's bathing suits. They're really big on the cross-dressing thing.
Okay,
Brought it up.
And you asked.
I asked. Everything's fair
And
game.
one thing that was funny to me was I liked the fact that Sensei had a sense of humor.
Yes, he did.
And
Yeah.
that sense of humor was like, okay, people could get teased at these events. And it was for the most part in good fun. I mean, occasionally things would cross the line and someone would have to be reeled in. But for the most part, it was harmless and it was sort of, congenial and familial, in its teasing.
Terry, what other martial arts styles have you trained in?
I've trained in Shotokan, karate, and in jiu-jitsu. And I have attended various seminars from all different walks of martial arts, because that's really how I started my training, was involved in the women's community with mixed martial artists.
Other styles?
I actually trained in judo when I was a child.
I did too, in elementary school.
Yeah,
I
right,
took judo.
right, exactly. Really great fun.
It was the most fun
Yeah,
ever.
yeah. And found Cuong Nhu in 1980, and after a while I started training in Aikido. I trained for a little while with a ninjutsu instructor in Atlanta.
Ninjutsu.
Yes.
Please explain.
Oh, it's just another system.
Jiu-jitsu in the dark?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Learn how to walk quietly. And Iaido, which is sword drawing,
Okay.
and a little arnis, a little eskrima, and judo. I trained with the highest-ranking judo woman, female instructor in the world, for 3 years in San Francisco.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did any of those martial arts styles have training camps? And skit nights?
Many of them have training camps, and none of them have skit nights,
I think-
to my knowledge.
Palma had skit night.
Palma
Well,
has skit
let's
night?
talk about Palma.
Mm-hmm.
You were a founder and the
She was the founder.
Founder and first president. So you get to talk about
Well,
FOMA.
there was an informal group of
First,
women.
tell everybody what it is.
Pacific Association of Women Martial Artists.
Okay.
And it started as an informal group, a small group of women that were training, got together at a summer place up in the Sierras so they could train together. And back in those days, there weren't that many women in martial arts. So most of us, if you were training in schools with mostly men or all men. And so there was this big void that they wanted to fill to create camaraderie amongst themselves. And when I first moved to the Bay Area, I immediately got involved in the women's self-defense community. And as a result, I got introduced to some of these people. And I found it incredibly inspirational to meet all these black belt women and all these people that were just like light years ahead of
Right.
me and all of this stuff. And
Do you realize now that you two are inspirations to the rest of us?
yeah, every once in a while I go, oh my God.
It's just what happens when you keep showing
Yeah,
up.
you just keep showing up and getting older, you know?
Just keep showing up. Okay, let's cycle back a minute to O-Sensei.
Yes.
Both of you trained with him. Tell us about him as a teacher, Allyson.
Well, he was very excited, very enthusiastic about Cuong Nhu. He was very compassionate, and he was also, remarkably physically gifted. So it was, he would say, grab my arm, and you'd grab it, and it'd be like grabbing this steel bar, and then he'd go,
And you were gone.
and you were gone.
Right.
And he loved to bring a little humor into teaching, and you just could tell he cared, and it was very sincere.
In the soft style curriculum, approximately how many students do you recall were engaged in that?
I want to say about a dozen when I was there, and we were on the mats at the center, and we did a range of throwing and joint locking arts and the forms.
And we talked about the ranking system. Did anybody reach the end of the rainbow?
Yes, there were several folks. Ed Shrigley was one. Susan Harris was another, and I can't remember if Jan Nelson might have achieved that, but there were several people. I did not. I only made it so far.
Because you moved.
I moved.
Right.
Yes.
Terry, any memories of teachings or being taught by O-Sensei?
Yes, most of my memories were either from training camp or from seminars when he came to California.
Because you were in California.
So I didn't have as much direct contact as frequently as Allyson did. But O-Sensei was just always going. There was never downtime. And on a test, everything was a teaching moment for him. I remember one time I had him at my house for dinner, and you could barely get through dinner without him popping up and talking about, like you say, grab your hand, grab your leg, try this, do that. And it could be, 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. If you were awake, he was
teaching.
Teaching, yeah. He just really was always in a teaching mode.
So you two are now teachers. You each have a school. They're both how far away from each other?
A few miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about your school, because we're going to hold off on the unpronounceable school.
Oh, okay. Well, my school is known as Hua-Sen Dojo, but I changed it to Emeryville Martial Arts just so it was easier for people to...
Hua-Sen Dojo means?
It means lotus flower, and I just wanted to choose a Vietnamese word. O-Sensei helped me. I told him I wanted the concept of the lotus, and he helped me then with the name to come up with the Hua-Sen, if I'm saying that properly from a Vietnamese
how
point
long
of view.
is your school?
It opened technically in 1993, and it's had various locations, but the location that I'm in now, I've probably been in for 12 years or so, and it's the one I'll probably stay in until such time as I either close my doors or someone else takes over. Or I get kicked out, one or the other, because I do rent it. Yeah, so my school consists of children ages 4 on up through adults, and I usually have about 100 students or so. That's
Wow.
kind of my where I hang. You know, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less.
So here's the big question. Not exact. How many black belts, how many dans from your school?
Black belts. Maybe a dozen to 15, maybe. I think that's the high end would be 15, maybe more. I don't have to
Dans?
count them all.
Dans?
Don rank, not as many. A lot of, because I teach so many kids,
Right.
sometimes they might be with me for 10 years till they leave for college, but they get their black belt and they're gone. So those that have actually had a shodan, I'm trying to create a black belt wall, and so far I've only got 4 plaques up on the wall, and I'm waiting on maybe 4 more.
Okay,
So
but-
maybe I've got
But
to
by
8.
the work you do with all of the rest of us, you've influenced many, many more people.
Well, yeah, various venues. Yeah.
All right, what's the name of the school?
The Unpronounceable, which I co-founded with Sensei Amy Weiner. I don't know how long, I think it's 18 years or so. It's called Duet Dang, which is Vietnamese for melting snow. So
Can
you've
we
got
just
those.
call it the melting snow?
I could.
Okay.
But we
yes.
want. I always say 2 yet 10.
I know, yeah.
So I
Which
just
is why
mispronounce it.
It's Amy actually found it and checked with those sensei, or not. I don't know if she. Yeah, yeah. I think she did check with him and got his blessing.
Okay. Your mix of students.
I usually have around a dozen. So we're a very small school. We're not really very visible. We have a space, but we don't have any signage. And we usually get people by word of mouth. And I've got a couple of teenagers, and most of my students are in their 40s.
Interesting difference. Mostly children.
Yeah, it's
mostly
about a
older.
2/3, 1/3 spread for me. Depends on if you consider the teenagers children or adults.
Depends on whether you consider the adults
Adults.
as teenagers.
Or
Right.
teenagers,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Cuong Nhu, comprised of 7 influences. So many of us have had judo, every different thing. What's special about Cuong Nhu to you, Terry?
Well, I like that it's so all-encompassing. But I think one of the reasons I like it is because I had fundamental training elsewhere. And so I had basics that I got from very specific martial arts that I then brought to my Cuong Nhu. I think it's harder for people that start in Cuong Nhu because they don't have that same foundation. So it's not that they won't get it, it's just that it will take that much longer to really understand the fundamental principles to make these arts come alive in a cohesive way, you know?
And you've said that kata is your favorite.
Yes.
What's your favorite kata? You're not
Maybe
limited to one.
Konkadai. Konkadai, maybe?
Okay, that's a Shotokan.
Yes.
Allyson, what element of Cuong Nhu is special to you?
I think that I also like the breadth. I mean, I always have something that I can learn and improve, even after 34 years. And I love learning. I really do love learning. I think that the community and the philosophy that is part of Cuong Nhu is what really sets it apart for me, because it is a close community with a lot of love to
It's a
it.
family.
Yes, and I think that the whole breadth of the curriculum is wonderful, and it's also really challenging, because it takes a long time to develop a lot of proficiency in Cuong Nhu, and so it's not a, you do it for a few years and you're done, and you do it for a few years and you're great at everything. That just doesn't happen. So.
Funniest Cuong Nhu story? Obviously, there must be some.
It's just hard.
I have to say, John and Mike in women's bathing suits is pretty funny.
Yeah, John and Mike
That's
together is
not exactly a martial artsy kind of.
Yeah.
Well, it's that family thing, It's like all kinds of weird stuff happens,
Right.
and
Most special Cuong Nhu memory?
Boy. In your list of questions, you asked for poignant.
Poignant is fine.
And I think there are a lot more poignant memories for me.
Okay.
This was kind of sad poignant, but when
It makes it poignant.
O-sensei's memory was declining and it was clear that he was ill, there had been discussions about what to do, how to set a succession plan. And we were at the San Diego training camp, and it was clear that he was sick. And Professor Cates was at the camp, and he had been a big advisor to Cuong Nhu for many years. And at that time, Grandmaster Quinn was the obvious choice to succeed O-sensei. And I remember walking across the quad with Master Mary, and we were talking about this has to happen soon. And Grandmaster Cates got all of the senior black belts together with Grandmaster Quinn, and they just did it. So they had a meeting, they got everybody to agree about the plan, and of course talk to O-sensei, and it was a very emotional event when they presented it, when O-sensei presented his belt
To Quinn.
to Quinn.
Terry?
Well, two things come to mind. Early on, I kind of came to Cuong Nhu as a bit of an outsider because I didn't start in Cuong Nhu. So I sort of had a different experience coming into the organization. And there was a lot of homophobia within the organization. It was primarily a white, Christian, Southern organization.
Started in Gainesville.
Yes, and I was living in Berkeley, and, I'm a lesbian, and I'm just like not used to being in that environment. And I'm used to a lot more tolerance in general and all kinds of people. So when I first came, it was a little bit of a shock to my system to be in this organization. But nonetheless, I was, happy to be here, and I would share some stories about things here and there. And I remember at a black belt meeting, this was several years into my being here, O-sensei said to everyone that he had a complete change of heart, that he had wanted to apologize for his ignorance about homosexuality, and that, he thought that it was a disease, that it was an illness that people had, and that it could be cured, and that he realized at that time that this was clearly not true, and he wanted to apologize to anyone out there that was, not straight or didn't have those values, and he asked for the style to become more tolerant as a style, to show love and to open their hearts, which is what the founding principle was, right? Open heart, open mind, open arms. And I just found it very, very touching that a man of his stature in a position that he was in would come out like that to his following and try to influence them to a higher level of being. So that was a very touching moment for me. You remember that?
Yeah, oh,
that
yeah,
black belt
yeah,
meeting?
yeah.
I mean, it was just amazing.
Amazing.
It was very transformative. And then another time, he was at my house. He would come out to Berkeley periodically, and I would invite him to my home for dinner. And it was right after I gave birth to my son. And we're sitting at the table, dining room table, and he hands me an envelope with money in it, like a gift, because I had just had a baby. And I didn't want to take it because I knew he didn't have a lot of money, number one, and I didn't want, but I didn't want to insult him to not accept a gift that he was giving me. And on top of it, it's my partner and I and our child, and it was just like this whole full circle of acceptance and love. And I was just very touched by his ability and his caring. So those are two very, very happy memories that I have of O-Sensei.
Final question. Convince me to join Cuong Nhu.
I do this all the time.
Take it away.
Well, I always tell people it's really fun. You learn really cool stuff, and there's practical application, there's art form, there's physical fitness, there's philosophy and self-improvement. And it's a great way to just stay meeting cool people and staying fit.
Yeah, what I like to tell people is that it's so much more than an exercise class. You can go to the gym, but this is so much more.
Yeah.
And if they want to go any further, I talk about how you'll learn to do things you never thought you could do, that you never dreamed you could do.
And they could potentially have instructors and friends like the two of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.